Hi everyone, my name is John Peaveler. I am back with the National Animal Care and Control Association. In this video, we're going to be talking about control poles, also known as catch poles, snare poles, rabies poles. One tool, many names. We're going to go through its attributes, manufacturers, models, maintenance, use. We're going to go through several different scenarios, but we're also going to be talking about the leash pole. We're going to introduce that as a concept and talk about how it can be a bridge between leashing and control pole use. We're also going to talk about the Y pole a little bit and how it can be used to help us apply this tool more quickly. So if we think back to the first video where we talked about the triangle, we'll throw up here with safe at the top, with effective at the bottom, and humane on the other side. And those are our three core concepts, and that applies no matter how dangerous the animal is, because we can still be professional and we can still be relatively humane. Doesn't mean that the outcome is going to be perfect, doesn't mean that we're not going to mess up when we deal with very difficult animals. I still get all that adrenaline pumping through my body when I'm dealing with an animal that's that dangerous. I know what that takes and what it means. So there are times when we've got to apply this pole and we've got to get the job done. But there are a lot of things that we could do to mitigate the impacts of this. The trauma that's applied to the animal, we can shorten how long we have to use it for. And so there's all sorts of different ways that we can incorporate this tool and still have that safe outcome and still have thought about humane and incorporated that into our handling style. So let's talk about the tools themselves. We'll talk about manufacturing, some of the different mechanical attributes. We'll talk about maintenance and storage. And I'm going to introduce you to everything we're going to cover for the rest of the video. First of all, I have the dual release catch pole from ACES, also known as Animal Care Equipment and Services. This is sold under their trademark Humaniac brand. This is their in-house offering. It's a really, really durable, stable tool. It's very well made. It has a bit of a thicker cable, which is fantastic. It's got a bigger head, which is a benefit on the back of the animal's neck as you're pushing. I don't want to say it's more comfortable, but it gives you a little more control, and I think it's maybe less uncomfortable than the smaller, rounder heads. It also has the quick release feature, which is this handle here, which is fantastic for getting the animal off quickly, but you do need to be careful not to hit that by accident. So definitely get used to that. It might not hurt to throw some yellow or red tape on there or something until you've really got it down in your mind. And if it's your tool that you've been issued, less of an issue, but if other people are maybe using this pole at some point and are not used to it, that can be a problem. The head on this tool also does not spin, and that can be a disadvantage. If the animal does what we call an alligator roll and they flip over, that's going to take about 2 to 3 inches at least of cable slack, and there shouldn't even be that much slack. So you're going to end up with a choking animal really, really quickly. So if the animal does spin, you need to spin the pole the opposite direction to compensate for that. And again, that comes back to, let's make sure we don't have the animal on the pole any longer than absolutely necessary. So if we've got it on and the animal is responding by rolling, it's going to be a very short period. We can counter roll, push them into a crate, get them into that vehicle, and call it done. All of the poles, regardless of manufacturer, we're going to want to store them with the cable almost all the way in. We want to make sure that there's a little bit of tension there. That's going to help to keep the shape. A little bit more is fine. I think that's bottomed out on this guy. On the other side, the tail needs a place to live, just to keep it from getting hung up. So this has got a little catch here. You just put that inside and store it flat. And that's the case for all of the poles. Do not store them standing on either end, because it's going to bend and warp the cable, and it's not going to run correctly. What I like to do personally is like to tie a prusik knot on here, and you can search that on the internet. So you just need a small piece of cord and a nail, and you can hang it on a wall. If you're putting it in a vehicle, just lay it flat. We also have today the catch-all pole. This is a 4-foot pole, as is the dual release pole. Both of them are 4. I personally prefer the 5. I wouldn't go more than 6 unless you really got to reach out. A lot of those longer poles are meant more for things like alligators. So if you're working in Florida, that's maybe an important tool for you. I know that Tomahawk makes an adjustable version, but for daily use for dogs, I prefer somewhere between the 4 and 6. I wouldn't go shorter and I wouldn't go longer. If you're a bigger, taller person, maybe the 6-foot. 5 is my sweet spot. These are the 4-foot versions. This is the basic entry-level catch-all pole. It's tried and true. It's a fantastic piece of equipment. The head does spin on this, so if the animal spins, I'm rotating that pole right now. I can rotate quite a bit until eventually the cable gets all bound up and then it starts to twist at the head. And we see that, we keep going, and I'm starting to feel the pressure come over. And so it's quite a bit of rolls, but you can see that taking out that slack. So again, storing it with the cable almost all the way in. With the catch-all poles, we've got a little bevel here, hole, and we're gonna go in there and just store that tail like that. You don't have to. It's more aesthetic. If you're hanging it inside of a building, I think that's ideal. If you're using it in a vehicle, flat is fine. Just remember, when you go to release these, I prefer to hold it this way. It almost never smacks you that way. If you hold it here and release, it's gonna smack you, and that can really come back and hurt you. So just at the end of the hand, release there, and it usually won't hit you and hurt. But again, if you're wearing gloves, like we talked about in the introductory video, if we've got a pole in our hand, we should have gloves on our hands. That should not smack your hand. Certainly should not hurt. We've also got a Y pole. This is the longer, newer adjustable pole. This is going from, let's see, about 4 feet to about 6 or 8 feet. No, more than that. 7 feet, called 7 feet. So it's a nice adjustable tool. It gives us really good distance. We're going to talk about how to incorporate that with the control pole use for a specific type of animal that it really helps to get the pole on more quickly. All right, so we have 2 types of leash pole. I have the tomahawk leash pole here. This is a tool that's a great hybrid between a leash and a control pole. It really is a great piece of middle ground. We'll talk about how to use it in just a second. Basically a big ring, piece of rope, piece of aluminum pipe, a handle, and it's really basic, but it really serves a great role. It was a great tool to have in our toolbox. This is the ACES offering for the leash pole, very similar construction, rope, this little piece of cord. The function of that cord is so that you can hold it vertically to get it onto an animal's head, and we'll demonstrate that here in a second as well. All right, so I want to first talk about a few basics of things that are universally true with this tool. In an ideal world, this is only going to be used on a leash-trained dog, a dog that's used to having something around its neck, because it's so invasive and it's such a primal response when something starts to choke you for you to have a really negative reaction and for you to fight that as much as you can. So that's true for a dog, for a person, like that's something that we can relate to, what that experience would be like. So we want to only put it on animals that are used to having something around their neck, if at all possible. When you have an animal that is maybe feral or fractious or just unsocialized, whatever the case may be for them, that they're just not used to having something around their neck, it can be an extremely invasive tool. So we need to keep that in mind. It doesn't mean that there aren't times when it's still the right tool to use for those animals, but it should be few and far between, because there's a lot of other things that we can do to avoid that. All right, so leash trained animals, that's number one. Number two, this is a pushing away from me tool, not a pulling toward me. So if I apply this pole to poor Naca here, and I try to drag him toward me, I'm trying to force him to come toward the thing that is at least part of the thing that's agitating him so much. This new person, this scary person, whether it's my uniform or demeanor or smell or just presence or whatever, I'm one of the things that's causing him stress, and I'm trying to drag him toward me. Now I may have to, in order to get him out of a hutch or out from under a building or whatever, may have to pull him out, and that's a reality. But as I transition, get him out, I want to get the dog in front of me. I can see the tightness a little better from this perspective, and also the head of the tool is at the base of the neck of the animal, and that just gives you a little bit more of a purchase area for me to control that animal. And now it's less of an ask for them to go away from me, but also it's harder for them to dig in, because as I push, their body weight goes over their front legs and they're compelled to take steps. And sometimes they'll resist to the point where even that's not working. But we can reevaluate, maybe we can get them directly into a crate. And that brings me to my next point. Anytime we do use this tool, we need to limit the duration of the use. So we need to be thinking, how close can I get my vehicle to this animal? And even better, if I can get a crate to that animal, can I get them in a crate and then get them to a vehicle? And sometimes that's a two-person concept, so I'm going to need 2 people to help me carry this crate. There are wheel systems that you can get, like for furniture moving, you can put under a crate and you can push that crate. What can we do to mitigate how long we have to use this, and therefore reduce the amount of trauma that we're applying to this animal, reduce any potential damage to them, and also reduce the risk to us and to loss that the animal can get away from us. If we've got to go all the way around this building or down 10 flights of stairs before we can get to a vehicle, and that's probably the best time to, like, let's bring a crate to this animal. All right, we got to catch pull him, but let's quickly get him into this crate, cover that crate. It's always the first thing we're going to do. Anytime we have an animal inside of a cage, we're going to cover it, and then we're going to move that animal via whatever we can. If we can get somebody to help us, maybe that's another member of public safety, somebody from your own agency, an owner, like whoever can reasonably help you carry that crate. And that may mean waiting a little bit, but if the alternative is traumatizing this animal for a long period of time, putting them through that, and then putting ourselves at more risk, exposing this situation to more people as we move through a community or a building or whatever, it can just get worse and worse for everybody the longer this draws out. So try to limit it to leash trained animals whenever possible. Definitely push instead of pull. Limit the frequency of use, definitely, but also limit the duration of use, how long it's going to be applied to an animal. Even a really fractious dog, if we can get it on them, get that animal pushed into a crate or get them into our vehicle more quickly, it's going to be better for everybody. Okay, so let's talk about use of the pole for other animals other than dogs. It's effectively contraindicated, as in we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't use it for other species because they just don't have the neck strength, and it's not designed for that. But it does have an application that it can be used, but we should really think about whether it's necessary, and we should definitely limit the duration of use. So if we need to get it onto another animal, let's say a raccoon or a cat or something like that, first, what's the reasoning? What's the thinking? For me, really the only acceptable application is going to be if the space the animal is in is either too narrow or both too narrow and too short, as in like a pipe. No other tool is going to fit in there. So I got to reach in there to get this cat that's inside of this pipe. Okay, so I can sneak that down there, get it over the shoulder, not just the neck, but over the shoulder, get it over. Hopefully I don't need to actually even keep this animal. They're just stuck for a second, so I don't even need to tighten it that much, just enough to pull them out and release them immediately. If I do need to take them, then I'm going to go straight out of that pipe and straight into a crate. And we can turn a crate on its back and go straight down into that crate and do a quick release, close that door. So if we have to use it for another species, we really want to limit how long that's going to be. It's got to go under the arm, and we really should think hard about, can I get a net? Can I get a towel? Like what can I do differently? Can I get a trap even? Can I get this animal to go into a trap? And that could be a live trap, even using the pole just to help guide the animal in, if you've got like a rabid raccoon or something like that. Because it's just not good practice to get this. Definitely not on a small animal's neck. There's so much risk of permanent and fatal damage if we go across the neck. But even over the shoulder, it's just an exceptionally invasive method for those situations. So let's try not to use it on species other than dog. All right, so from here, let's dive into some scenarios, loading with different techniques into vehicles and crates and all that good stuff. All right, in this segment, I'm going to be applying the control pole to a dog from a crate. We're going to load up an aftermarket ramp, so this could be added to any type of ACO rig. I've got it connected with a couple of tie-down straps here, and I've got the towel in place to help ease the transition in. I want the animal to have some bedding in case either they've been drooling or if they end up urinating en route. I don't want them slipping around and hurting themselves and having an even more traumatic experience. So that towel is going to help both with the transition from the ramp into the vehicle, but it's also going to help during transport, make it a bit more humane of an experience. So when I'm working at the crate, and obviously this is a bit of a contrived scene, the vehicle extremely close, but I want to get this crate as close as I can. And I do want to note that you can have custom caging made for your ACO rigs. So you can have a wire cage made that will fit those door dimensions, and Tomahawk Live Trap can do that for about $160 depending on the size of the space, so that you could take that cage out, bring it right to the animal, load them into that cage and either carry it here. You can get those sort of furniture movers with wheels and roll that animal onto elevators and around buildings, and you can get whatever type of wheels you want on that type of setup. You might need a couple of tie straps to get that there, so you can get the animal all the way here, and you can actually get them up the ramp and into the vehicle. Definitely going to be easier with 2 people, but there are ways to make that work with a single person. I don't have that cage today. I'm gonna show you transitioning from the crate, just a regular old airline crate, into the vehicle, assuming that we can't fit this inside of the vehicle. So I'm going to be very careful with the door, and if I need to, I'll use my hand. We are using a stuffed animal in this particular scenario. Notice I have my gloves on, and I don't want to stick my fingers in there any more than I absolutely have to. So this animal can be pretty vicious at the moment, and it's going to be very difficult to apply this pole if this dog is attacking it. We're going to show you a technique in just a second to mitigate that significantly, but it really requires 2 people. So you want to make sure that it's on properly before you move your leg, and you really want to be in position. So we talked about push versus pull. The only time we're going to pull is to get them out from one place and to transition them into pushing. And obviously I want his feet on the ground. He's a stuffed animal. We're trying to not traumatize any of the animals we're working with today by putting them on this pole, pushing them up and in over the towel, holding them in place. And this notch here, if you're not familiar, is for the control pole or for the leash. And we'll get that off by working it around the dog's neck. All right, so in this scenario, we're going to simulate that we've got a dog on a leash and that seemed like it was going well, and then it suddenly stops going well. And so we're going to transition to a defensive handling stance here at the vehicle, where this animal is suddenly becoming extremely reactive and coming out at us. We want to get out of here. And so I can come inside my vehicle and just secure it that way, sneak out the other side so that leash is stuck inside of the door. I'm going to come around, get my control pole out of my vehicle, throw on a pair of gloves. It'll take you a second in transition. Obviously, Finn is not posing any kind of threat, but it's not impossible that in the course of a career you're going to have a dog just go really haywire on you in a way you didn't anticipate. And that can be caused by a myriad of things in your environment, some other dog or person that's a trigger for an animal. But now I have him secured and I can transition him onto a catch pole. And I'm not going to do all of that to him right now, but at this point I could open the door, release the leash, and get him into the vehicle. In this scenario, we're going to be working with an extremely dangerous dog that is behind a barrier. And we don't actually have an extremely dangerous dog. We'll be working with Naca, the stuffed dog, but we're going to demonstrate a technique that requires 3 people. We're going to be using a control pole, a Y pole, and a third person to manage the door to make sure that the animal doesn't get out. Their only job is going to be to control that barrier. The Y pole is actually going to be used to keep the animal's mouth busy, because it's consistently very, very difficult to get a control pole over an animal's head if they're actively attacking that pole. And so the Y pole is actually going to serve to keep that animal's mouth busy. and we're going to work the noose of the control pole down the length of the Y pole and over the animal's head. In this scenario, we're in a bit more of a controlled environment, so this is more like a shelter scenario where there are more doors and gates, but this would work at any type of enclosure with an animal. And you may be able to get away with 2 people. I think 3 people is ideal for this particular method, but I think you can manage it with 2 as long as one of you can control the barrier well. But as with all of these videos, we're going to be practicing or demonstrating absolute best practice if you had just the right circumstances, and then it's up to you to figure out how to navigate that in the real world with the resources that you have. All right, so now in our final segment, we're going to talk about the leash pole. I did that brief introduction earlier. The leash pole really is a great bridge between a standard leash and a control pole because it kind of gives us the option of having both. Because it really is a leash built into a pole, so it's basically just a slip lead with an oversized ring. It has this little piece of cord, and both models have that. The Aces model and the Tomahawk model are very similar in function. That little piece of cord, that's just going to let you hold it in any direction, any orientation, so you can go straight over an animal's head. And as you see in the live demo here in a sec, you can use food inside of it to distract the dog as you go over. In a real world situation, we were working with a shelter dog in the live scenario in just a second. In real world, you would apply a little bit more pressure to get it over. You'd move a little more quickly. Might be a little bit scary, but it's going to be far less impactful than the use of a control pole at a much lower price point. These come in somewhere around $50 shipped. So it gives us the ability. We can simply walk as a leash, just loose, if the animal tolerates that well. And if they don't, we can transition by pulling the rope through and bringing the rope down. It's very important that we come down back against the handle and hold. And with this position, with this tool, I have just as much control as I do with a control pole. I have just as much restraint, except with the one big benefit that I can actually give them another ½ inch. I can give them another inch. So I can ease up on it very easily, and I can also add a little more tension if I need to. So I can really fine tune it a lot more than I can with a restraint pole because of that big jump that you have with the spring. So it really lets us get it fine tuned onto the animal, which lets us make that animal a little bit more comfortable. Obviously Naca is not loving it. He's falling over because he's got no body weight. The one challenge you can have is getting it off. It's not that hard when you're inside of a crate or a vehicle or something like that. If you can get the pole into the ring is actually quite heavy, and that's why it's designed that way, so it comes on quickly, and you need to feed the end back through the pole to get that slack again. So you can get it on and off. I would try it maybe 20 times on a friendly dog or a stuffed dog or something like that before you try it on any other dog.